technologies out of the spiritual reservoir of the universal Akashic records. For a long time, power and love were united. Human beings did not have an ego separate from the higher self. Humankind experienced a blossoming in all branches of science and in space exploration. Almost all illnesses were curable, and people often lived to a very old age. They had contact with other planets and with outer space human and spiritual beings. The human race living at that time possessed the universal understanding that the planet is a biological living being, and that the planet is a body and its people the cells of that body. People knew neither ownership nor egoism, and they kept their planetary body, the Earth, clean, because they knew that they only had one Earth in common. They could neither sell nor divide it, nor were they allowed to market its water, air, or resources. Everybody had everything they needed. There was no class distinction. There were neither rich nor poor people. They gave to each other and lived in abundance. The living cosmic laws of brotherhood replaced the dogmatic religions and laws. People did not know labor. Rather, they contributed joyfully to the community with their personal achievements. Each individual's talents were encouraged. The understanding of both the inner spiritual worlds and the material outer worlds enabled the archetypes, the risen masters of wisdom, to live amongst humans and to teach them the great mysteries and initiation steps of the temple. The simplicity of the universal knowledge of the five elements, earth, fire, water, air, and the cosmic ether, formed the basis of a global sustenance. Humans still recognize that they're a part of God on earth and that nothing exists separately from God. They were conscious that if they were a part of the creational spirit which had been materializing for millions of years, they had to possess in themselves dormant but almighty powers waiting to be awakened. In mystery schools, step by step, they learnt to rise to a God-human consciousness. No one prayed to a separate God. They still remembered that they were fallen and incarnated angels who had to attend the school of life and be reborn until mastering and living through any conceivable experience. Until the time came when they would ascend to higher dimensions of consciousness. The masters of wisdom knew the secret of the expanding and contracting of the cyclic cosmos. In the Indian Vedic texts, it was described as the inhaling and exhaling of God. The expansion of the cosmos from the source was called the Omega cycle, since everything diverged from the source. The further the Milky Way and its suns moved away from the source, the weaker their connection to the spiritual source whence everything comes. This means that all life in spiritual decline or descent to lower dimensions slips into the third dimension of the solid material universe. Atlantis and its race were still anchored in the fourth dimension. The masters of wisdom knew that at the peak of this civilization, the cosmic cyclic plan had anticipated that the souls would move down into the third dimension in order to totally experience the forgetting of their divine source and to live through the so-called Dark Age. The Brotherhood of Atlantis. At a time when Atlantis reached its peak, ambitious scientists were determined to draw the last secrets from nature. They directed their research into the control of the gravitational net, just as today's government's secret research projects are involved in the control of all material structure. They studied electrogravitation, the compression of matter through sound and light, They built transmitters for the study of time through large crystals, using geomantic power places for energy field merging. Pyramidal structures were used to communicate with higher worlds. They used science to look for the original sound from which everything came. All this was part of the creation plan until this civilization had reached its peak with its exploration of the outer world. Then Atlantis entered a dangerous phase. Until this time, scientists and high priests had been united. Only a divinely guided human being, one who thinks with his heart and feels with his head, was entitled to divulge the secrets of creation. Such a scientist and high priest was guided by God and higher spiritual hierarchies, and was in harmony with its creations. He never threatened lives through any aspirations for power. But a new dark age appeared on the earth. There were students of masters who had not yet completed their initiation, and who experimented and searched for the original sound, Urton, without the permission of the sacred council of the seven wise beings. With this, the destruction of Atlantis was sealed. Separate thinking without divine guidance, without the intuition from the heart, used for the sake of personal will and power, alienated science and the priesthood. A preordained catastrophe occurred. The Council of the Seven Wise Beings, who at that time resided physically on the earth, withdrew. The Council warned the God-chosen people and sent them to different continents in order to safeguard humanity's descendants. Everybody knows the Atlantis legend. I don't have to repeat it here. About Atlantis, you'll find an abundance of literature, about 10,000 volumes. I would say that every few years, some clever person comes along and proves that Atlantis was either in the Azores, or near Bimini, or in the Mediterranean, the island of Santorini, and so on. There are plenty of Atlantis theories and Atlantis locations, but nothing until today that can be tangibly proven. Now you ask, if Atlantis as a culture reached round the world, specialists, I mean archaeologists, would say no. So you would find their argument is not convincing. You would say that any technologically advanced culture needs some kind of metal. They would work with and melt this metal. And if Atlantis had a worldwide reaching culture, then we should have found used or empty mines of some kind of minerals. And none has emerged so far. And that is why specialists say Atlantis could not have had a worldwide culture. The more perfect a culture, the less it would need these kinds of minerals and raw materials as we have them today. One could even say a perfect culture would maybe destroy itself from the outside in a perfect manner, and nothing would be left behind. So we're still up in the air. I would say Atlantis. Yes, Atlantis did exist. Literally, you can prove it quite clearly, but objectively with a solid object in your hand, one is uncertain, unfortunately. After the catastrophe, nations were dispersed. Knowledge, languages, and traditions were divided. Everything progressed in polarity and division. The Dark Age also saw the beginning of the cycle of descent into an ever-increasing division of individuality and of separateness. For the first time, the Dark Brotherhood made its appearance. Until then, all knowledge had been common to all. There had been no knowledgeable elite, neither was the mass of people kept ignorant. There were no rulers, no people being ruled, and no governments or bureaucracies. Most spiritual guides of the outer world, along with the worldly leaders, fell under the influence of polarity. The now self-appointed leaders had their own city-states, and because of the knowledge they kept to themselves, they were worshipped more and more, and were paid duties. The Brotherhood of Atlantis ensured that knowledge was divided into two parts. On the one hand, the exoteric knowledge accessible to all. On the other hand, the esoteric secrets only accessible to the initiated members of the Brotherhood. The saying, "knowledge is power," dates from that time. When knowledge